everyone. My name's Zaiba Jabbar, and I'm a curator, a researcher, and educator. And I'm really happy to be here today with you, joined by Ali Eslami. We're introducing a new series for Generation, and it's a 5-part video series exploring sacred tech and alternative temporalities. And a little bit about myself. I'm a independent curator and founder of a curatorial initiative agency called Her Visions, which supports marginalised voices working with at the intersections of art, technology and culture. I might just also say that the programme will be hosted over the next few months, where I'll be talking to inviting different artists to talk through their practice, and we're looking at these ideas of the languages of cinema, video games, and AI, and how that articulates the spiritual, the mystical, and the enlightened. And yeah, there's no one better way to begin this journey than with Ali Eslami, whose works kind of look at a whole range of disciplines, from VR, interactive simulation, and performative lectures that draws on sort of non-Western philosophies. So I'm just going to introduce Ali Eslami, who's an Iranian Dutch artist based in Amsterdam. His work deals with long-term, practice-based research that builds and grows through speculative thinking and world building. His work engages and plays with temporal and spatial investigations of memory, computation, human cognition and emotions, often informed by non-Western philosophical frameworks such as Suhrawardi's illuminationism. This line of inquiry results in forms of poetic engineering that seek the potential line between the real and the unreal. His engineering background and passion for video games nurtured an obsession with cybernetics and computation, and continue to build his curiosity towards the shifting roles of form and function that create virtual worlds. He works across various mediums, including VR and interactive simulation, film, writing, installation, and performance lectures. His work has received awards, including the IDFA Doc Lab Award for the Best Immersive Non-Fiction in 2016, the Golden Calf for the Best Interactive in 2020 with Mamali Shahafi, and the Creamer Prize for the LWL Museum Munster, and Wendy Gutman Prize in 2025. And it's a real pleasure to have you here to talk through your work, Eshraq. So yeah, it's really exciting to have you, Ali, and thank you for being here.
Thank you, Zaiba. It's a great pleasure to share this conversation with you. I think without any further ado, I can start sharing my presentation. Today I'm going to share a bit about my practice, and especially through my recent project that is in development for almost 2 years now, which in essence is a word building practice using computation, which leads to so many different kinds of outcomes. And today I would like to share those outcomes with you, and kind of talk about each and how they kind of influence each other. So as Zaiba already mentioned about my background, I wouldn't go too deep into this, but so I grew up in Iran, and I was always obsessed with video games. So my childhood was kind of really shaped by video games and computers. So I had a lot of influence from that, and I learned 3D when I was a teenager, modding video games, especially football games, which I used to play a lot back then. So modding means like you you start to kind of modify the game that already exists. That means you have to learn a little bit of 3D modeling, and so in a way it's kind of a hacking process. So you hack the game in order to add your own content and inject it into the game. So that was kind of my early times, kind of like getting involved with having some agency with the computation, let's say. And then growing up, I was really into architecture, and I wanted to study architecture, but somehow I couldn't get into the university because it's quite, I would say, competitive in Iran. So yeah, I ended up studying civil engineering. But at the same time, I was working in an architectural agency as a 3D artist for visualization purposes. So so I was kind of like in between those two. But overall, looking back now, like engineering has and architectural design has always been like part of my mindset, becoming a self-taught artist, because I didn't have really any like artistic background. It was all mostly through just messing around and using my own skills to build things. So the engineering mindset has always been there. They're trying to make things and build things that actually work, and try to problem solve and deal with limitations, which engineers basically do on a daily basis. Until I did the Rijks Academy in 2021 till 23. So that was my main kind of art. It's hard to say, it's not really an education, but it's kind of like but you learn a lot through this kind of residency. So I work mainly with long-term projects, like spanning many years. Like the project that you see here as a screenshot of False Mirror, I worked on between 2017 until 2022. So it's been many years that because I like to get involved in a long-term process and make and evolve a certain body of work, and see how time changes it, and how which parts of it I abandon and which parts of it I recreate. So it becomes this kind of like very kind of generative process, and then outcomes kind of come out of these bodies of works in different formats. But yeah, so far, I mean, I started mostly focusing on VR in my practice since 2016, but until 2022, I kind of stopped using VR for a while because I wanted to explore interactive simulation a bit more as a medium, and then also with film and video, they became more of my mediums. I don't say I would abandon VR, but I feel a bit of a fatigue as an artist because it became a little bit too technical, and the creative side of it was a bit overshadowed by the technical burdens of maintaining a fragile medium such as VR. Anyways, I won't go too deep into this, but let's go into the meat of the presentation. So the work that precedes the current project that I would like to explain today about is called Homa's Phantom. This work, I'm mentioning this work and showing this work because it opened up for me a whole new direction in my art practice. The intention behind it was to engage with Persian heritage and mythology, but not as a static archive, as a dynamic modular playground. And this was also the first time I really tried to make something, an interactive simulation, as a format that I'm trying to work more on. So the design of this experience draws on three different concepts and fuses them together in one coherent experience. So first is the mythical Homa bird, which is a bird that is in the Persian mythology, is a very ancient icon. We can see the Persepolis signs of it in the columns. And it's a bird that is told to be like a bird of heaven and always flies above earth and never lands. The other concept that this work is based on is the architecture of the courtyard houses of Kashan, which is a very kind of the desert houses that are traditional in central and south of Iran. Have a very distinctive architecture, and how they deal with nature is very interesting. They have these courtyards, and then all the houses, the rooms are built around them, and the house is structured in a very kind of in a introverted way. And then they use also lots of wind catchers which catch the wind and then bring it into the house. So it's very like analog air conditioning, but it's very smart and also very beautiful constructs. Another concept was that I kind of infused into this was the idea of the labyrinth, which is essentially a Greek concept. So all of these together created this speculative construct, which is this house that is kind of flying above in the sky and becomes a sanctuary of Homa birds. So in a way, I tried to kind of extend the mythology through a simulation. Because mythologies are basically like stories that we tell over time, and they shape a mythology in like long kind of like durations in like thousands of years. They are not told once and then they stay like that. They are like very dynamic, and they change and evolve. Anyways, so in this work, modularity and interaction allowed for, as a result of it, of the experience, allowed for pre-Islamic and post-Islamic traditions to enter into a dialogue and start coexisting rather than being like separated by historical categories. You can see here some more screenshots on how it was presented. First time it was in a new institute in Rotterdam, part of an exhibition called Reboot. So the user or the viewer basically has this trackball on the left hand, so you can roll that, and basically that allows you to crawl the labyrinth of this house forward and backward in time, but also space. So it's kind of like time and space is controlled with your left hand, and then with your right hand you can look around with this flight stick and shoot red orbs into the architecture and surrounding architecture and reveal the memories that are embedded within each of these pieces of walls. So the modularity is at the core of this work. So yeah, without talking too much about it, I prefer to show an excerpt of the experience so you can see how it actually works in action. One thing to note is that when the work is idle, that means when no one is using the work, the computer itself crawls the labyrinth, so it goes into its kind of an autopilot mode. Okay, now I'm going to play the simulation video for you.
Ali, can you just tell me a little bit about the sort of navigation that's occurring here?
Yeah, so basically there's a predefined path that the computer is destined to follow in this labyrinth. And with the red ball, with the red orb or the trackball, the user can go back and forward along this path. But you have the freedom to look wherever you want and kind of influence your surrounding with shooting these balls. And so it's kind of like a loop that constantly repeats itself. But you can influence the loop by disrupting it in a way. That's the user's kind of role in here.
The other equity driven or sort of driven leap your way. So you could have bend in time in the world.
Yeah, sorry, your voice my video was too loud. I couldn't hear your question. Can you repeat it?
That's okay. So I was just saying that, so that the idea is that you live in this kind of perpetual, or you navigate these perpetual loops.
Yeah.
And then through these loops, these sort of like modular kind of like existence, then is there a way that you then, do you have any sort of ways that you're kind of being, you said that this is this kind of like autoplay moment,
Yeah.
how you can kind of go back and forth in time, which
Yeah.
I think is really fascinating. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's in a way, it becomes a bit of a ritualistic practice in a way, because it's the same loop, which is this 20-minute crawl in the labyrinth. And then when you reach the end of the loop, it will self-destruct the whole construct, as you see in the film and the video. So then it repeats the whole loop again. But as a user, you're also kind of revealing that your encounter with this sanctuary, because in a way, this whole construct is a sanctuary. And when you shoot these balls into different pieces of the sanctuary, each of the pieces, or like the walls or the floors, they all have their own embedded kind of memory. And that memory is, in a way, what the birds has seen when falling on Earth before dying. Because there's another story within the mythology of this Homo bird, is that when it lays the new eggs above the sky, they break while falling, and if the little bird can start to learn flying, they can fly back to their mother and join it. Otherwise, they will drop on Earth and they die. So the memories that you see is kind of in the sanctuary, is kind of like a sanctuary of those fallen birds, and what they have seen in the last moments of falling, which could be quite random things like 3 chickens or yeah. So that was like a kind of the structure. It sounds a little bit complex and weird, but yeah, I think that was my kind of attempt to extend or actually contribute to this mythology with a simulation.
Yeah, it's so fascinating, Ali. I kind of, I was trying to put myself into thinking about sort of, I guess, reincarnation through the way that we sort of like interact in the virtual spaces. And when you were saying about how the sort of the eggs that are sort of like dropped from the sky, is the thing that you're that the player or the sort of like, I guess, the protagonist that isn't seen, how that's sort of like shooting into the environment, that sort of idea of like there's this very like multi-dimensional aspect to this sort of like rebirth or reincarnation.
Yeah.
I feel like you're encouraging through this like the through the simulation, which is very thought-provoking. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Any other thoughts? But we can also talk a bit more at the end. So
Yeah. Yeah. No, thank you. I think I'll go ahead with the Ishraq because there's a lot to talk about, so then we can come back to it at the end. So to understand the philosophical foundation of my work, I need to introduce Shahabuddin Sohrawardi, which is a 12th century Persian philosopher, and he's known as the founder of the school of Illuminationism. He wrote a very famous book called Hikmat al-Ishraq, which is the philosophy of illumination. His central idea is that knowledge is not only arrived at through rational argument, it can also be experienced directly through presence and illumination. So he kind of sees the world and reality as different gradations of light or hierarchies of light, where light of light is God, as it's known in a monotheistic religions, and angels and demons are different forms of light. Even matter and thoughts and cognition are forms of lights, but just different kind of gradients in this kind of hierarchy of light. So that's his ontology, but it gets much more complex than that. But anyways, his thoughts was quite kind of experimental and radical for his time, which unfortunately led to him being executed at the age of 36. So he was kind of considered dangerous by the Islamic authorities of that era, even though he was considering himself a Muslim. But through his ontology, he kind of created a continuum between Islam and pre-Islamic ideas like Zoroastrianism, which I think led to him being executed. So this philosophy gives me this conceptual framework for what I'm trying to build, which are basically environments that produce knowledge through direct encounter and not through definitions. Here are two modes of knowing that Sohrawardi distinguished. On the left, we have the peripatetic knowledge, the Aristotelian tradition, rational and discursive, and mediated by concepts and logical proofs, which is a bit abstract and indirect, kind of academia, or actually a lot of bodies of knowledge that we produce are peripatetic, especially more so in the West. On the right, there's knowledge by presence, which is intuitive, immediate, unmediated, and self-evident, embodied and experiential. The question that my work asks is, can we design computational environments that facilitate this second kind of knowing? And can immersive art become a technology of presence? Especially, I mean, presence is a very loaded concept, especially as also a very political thing. And I mean, talking about social media and how the whole idea of attention and presence is almost kind of taken away from us day by day. And it's really hard to be present for ourselves in the world we are living now. So in that way, for me, that is also a political act. So this brings me to Ishraq, which is my current body of work and my long-term endeavor. I have started since 23 after that Hamas work, which I showed you earlier. The title means illumination in Farsi and also in Arabic, which directly references Sohrawardi. The intention is threefold here. So to build a computational environment for practicing knowledge by presence, to reinterpret Sohrawardi's ontology as a dynamic and experiential system, and to use word building as a method for philosophical experimentation. and kind of treating I'm kind of treating the game engine here, Unreal Engine, as a philosophical laboratory. In design, I follow three main principles for Ishraq. It has to be modular, it has to be playful and immersive. So this body of work is generating or being processed along 4 different kinds of outcomes, which I will show you today, these examples of these 4 different types. So first is the interactive simulation, which is the core, built in Unreal Engine. It's the first thing that came and emerged out of this work. Second is the film, which are cinematic works emerging from the simulation. Third is the immersive installation. This means like physical exhibition space where cinema and interaction gets combined into a new format. And lastly, documentation, which is logging the process, recording and sharing the process publicly. So let me take you through each of these, and then with examples and excerpts, you can get a better idea. First is the interactive simulation, where the work emerged from. You can see here a screenshot of the menu of the work when you run it. So it runs like a game, basically, okay, PC game. So you see here, you can, I can describe the format as some kind of like an open notebook here. So each note is a different model or level that you can load and open in Ishraq. So basically, it's kind of like an interactive notes that you can you take like scribbles or doodles, and the words that I use for these notes are modules, which you will see in the video. There are many other different elements, like there's a canvas element, which you can load your note or your level in a different canvas, like a desert, or an ocean or a grid. So that's kind of like what holds your model. So there are many different design decisions that took over this kind of like experience. But I'm going to show you now some collected moments from this real-time or gameplay footage recorded in the past 2 years, so you can get an idea of what this experience can look like. Now the hack I found is you can increase the time and then walk. Kind of a good hack. Again, walking on myself. Yeah, it's the Asian walker. Yeah, it's kind of amazing, actually. These are like really weird moments that can occur through these kind of interactions. Just being able to kind of do this move, something I never expected. Now I can descend ziggurat. Be ready for low FPS. It's going to stutter a lot. It's going to be a big hit on my computer. Let's go. So now Now my FPS has dropped to maybe, I don't know, 5 per second. I mean, it's a lot to compute. It's around 7,000, I think, modules. And all of them has to be calculated in terms of physics. Every frame, that's a lot on the CPU. Yeah, and in this clip, you can see the different components that shape the simulation. Like on bottom right, it's all the different agents that exist in a show. Agents are kind of like the vessels that can do things in the world. They're kind of like pawns or bodies, and then they will be taken or they will be possessed by souls, which is another thing in a shop. So souls can take over different bodies or agents, and each of these agents have different forms of navigation. One can fly, the other can be like first-person shooter, the other is just a rolling ball. So that's through these agents you can have an agency in the world and change things and manipulate these modules around you, which are basically the building blocks of your world, kind of like in Minecraft, the cubes, but here they are more expressive, for example. And you can add functions, which I call them spells, and apply them to the world around you, to the modules. So you see these modules flying because I applied the flight spell into all of them one by one, and now they're flying around, as you saw in the other video. So the functions or the spells are also modular, and they can be stacked. On top, on the conveyor belt, you can see all the modules that ever existed on Ashraq so far. So they're kind of like the letters of an alphabet. So the more you have of them, the more expressive you can be in your word building. So yeah, that's kind of the core simulation, and I kind of change things over time, add things to it, and yeah, that becomes the kind of the playground or the core where everything else emerges. Going ahead, we have the film format, which is something in the start of 2025 I decided to work on and pursue, which is the contrast with this open-ended and non-linear simulation. Film allows me to craft a specific journey through these words that is context-sensitive and driven by narrative and storytelling. And so far I have made the first 20 minutes of it, which I will show some clips here and explain a bit of the narrative structure. But first I'm going to play an introduction of the film, the first 2 minutes of the film, which actually lays down a lot of the ideas that I spoke about illumination and the kind of this the threshold between the divine and this technological digital realm of Isra. Yeah, and then yeah, so this the narrative structure of Ishraq is also built on story loops, what I call them, story loops. So it's a series of interconnected cycles. Each loop is a self-contained mythic narrative that connects back to the larger ontological whole. So in the film, there are in the current earlier version of the film are two loops. Loop one is about mythic George Bush in a ziggurat of ore. The starting point is a real world event, George Bush visiting the ancient ziggurat in Iraq. The collision of American military power and on the oldest monumental structure on Earth became a provocative entry point. So in this simulation, the ziggurat exists simultaneously as an archaeological site, but also as a mythological threshold and a political symbol. Because in real life, the ziggurat does have a very interesting history. It's an ancient structure built in 2500 BC in the Mesopotamian, where it's now is in the southern Iraq. And its modern history is also interesting. Saddam Hussein was obsessed with the place. He even built a military base right next to it during the Gulf War, which was George Bush's father. Then after the invasion of the US Army with George Bush the son, they took over the ziggurat. So this complex history carries over the film, narrated as the soul of George Bush, which is a mythic soul. It's kind of a combination of him and his father, and going through their kind of paranoias and the fears and some kind of delusions about this place. I'm going to show you just the first 1 minute of this as an excerpt, so you get an idea what George Bush sounds like here.
All right. Where do I start? This ziggurat is what you might call the unfinished business of my life. Believe me, never told a soul about it. Back when I was still in the office, second term, we had our troops stationed near the ziggurat of war. You might have heard of it, real old Sumerian, ancient kind of hold. And Saddam, get this, Saddam built an air base right next to it. Said it gave him ancient protection of some sort. He even ordered restoration of the facade and the staircase back in the 80s. The guy was obsessed with the place. Obviously, he wanted to extend the collateral damage into the ancient world, but they always stuck with me, that even a tyrant like Saddam believed in ghosts, even if it was just a PR stunt. Anyways, after the invasion, we took over the Talil air base nearby, and with it, the great ziggurat of war. Now, you could say, our boys became his guardians.
Yeah, so as you see, it's kind of like a story set through the soul of George Bush, and actually a lot of the events and the facts that you see through the narration are real facts, and those images are documentation of those. And then there are, of course, some speculations and fictionalized elements on top of it. So I kind of play with that in between zone.
Yeah, that's so. It's so. There's so many layers that you're operating on there, Ali. I love this sort of kind of this. This kind of almost like there's this element of like nostalgia, but then there's something that's never happened, but because of the speculative element of the storytelling, but interwoven with these facts as. I think that comes across really as a really kind of informative and educational way almost of developing a sort of these new mysticisms, or kind of utilizing this idea of like sacred tech. And I know that's something we've talked a little bit before, but just wanted to add that.
Yeah, no, thank you. Yes, it's also it's quite fun to make these kind of story loops, because it gives a lot of freedom as well to kind of summon a soul of someone and bring a whole context into this kind of seemingly generic word, and then everything starts to become very specific, and so they're kind of like the meaning becomes localized. So that's why I like storytelling in contrast with this never-ending non-linear stimulation, because then you can be more like specific and fine-grained, and also I think we are kind of evolved with stories culturally, and there are things that really stick to our memories more than anything else.
And also like that ability to be able to like craft and these alternative temporalities that we can engage with through technology, I think is so it is kind of allowing us to kind of be able to world build in a lot more sort of in a much more meaningful way, I guess.
Yeah, and I guess that's why I kind of emphasized on modularity in a way, because these modules are kind of like the building blocks, and kind of it's kind of like because it allows you to be expressive in a new way. So if you are creating your own language, that allows you to also say things that you couldn't possibly say in other languages. So
engineering thinking as well.
yeah,
That's such a kind of that really is so evident and runs beneath everything that you're sort of building here as well. So
Thank you. Yeah, so going forward, the second loop is a shorter loop. It's a very stark contrast with the desert realm that we just saw. This one is in Amsterdam, where I live since 2018. So it's my lived experience. So I created a kind of like a replica of an Amsterdam Central, the Centrum area with the canals. So the story happens there through the soul of Lies Hoekstra, who is an assistant curator working in the city's museum. So we follow her absurd day at work. It's kind of her routine, and this loop kind of taps a bit into the institutions and how hypocrisy in the art world can happen kind of like under the skin, but here is a little bit dialed in and really absurd, which I don't go into its details. There's a lot to talk about here. There's a lot of specificities and things that actually triggered me to make this kind of content and story. The architecture of this city block, as you see, is like two parts. There's this commercial area where the big museum is, and there's a grocery supermarket store. Everything on that side of town is very kind of ordered, and the modules are like as expected, like business as usual. On the other side of the town, where it's residential, it's very messed up, and all these modules are kind of, as you can see in the bottom middle image, is a bit topsy-turvy. And for me, this kind of also reminds me of the housing crisis that we have in the Netherlands and in Amsterdam. This very makes up for a very precarious situation for a lot of people. So yeah, I'm going to show another small excerpt so we can have a peek into a day in the life of this soul, Lies Hoekstra.
Best aan werk, omdat teken ik alles nieuwe NDA. Ja, oh no. Elke dag moeten we weer een nieuwe NDA ondertekenen. Nou, hier zijn we dan. Het Stadsmuseum. Mijn fijne werkplek. Meestal ontbijten we als eerst met z'n allen in de kantine. Mijn eerste taak vandaag is naar de kelder gaan om de dagelijkse kas van het museum op te halen en naar het depot te brengen. En ze hebben dus net deze nieuwe installatie gekocht. Hij is gemaakt van Amazon-dozen. Heel conceptueel. Ik vul ze dus 1 voor 1 met contant geld om de waarde een beetje op peil te houden. Hallo, van een paar tools buiten. De tecnologie.
Yeah.
I was reading that you was inspired by seeing an exhibition by Pamela Rosencrantz.
Yeah.
Liquid Bodies.
Yeah.
And could you just maybe say a little bit about how that inspired this scene?
Yeah. So I went to the whole scene, or the whole storyline, was kind of inspired by me visiting the Stedelijk Museum in Amsterdam during the summer 2025. And there, yeah, I saw that her solo show there. And it's somehow really kind of triggered me in a not in a positive way, because I don't know if was it about the curation or was it about the work itself. Somehow it felt really hypocritical to me, that a work that was kind of overproduced, but was also trying to somewhat critique capitalism, as if we don't know capitalism exists. I mean,
boxes and
yeah.
replicate in the
Yeah, so in my interpretation, I imagined the museum actually acquired that work, so they put it in their depot, and for them the way to keep the value of the work was to invest money from their own cash reserves into the work to create this image of value, which for me it's that's this elite part of the art world which functions in that way, and somehow it works. So that was part of so that's just one part of it, and there's a bigger exhibition on the top floor of the main exhibition in the museum, where there's another really strange and hypocritical exhibition happening there. Anyway, so I kind of tried to make my own museum in the city, and maybe later on I'll make another show there with different contexts. But for me, this was a fun attempt to just play with the institutional space. Just react to what really triggered me in my last visit to the museum.
And I love that sort of like time coupling that's occurring when we're talking about sort of like temporalities or alternative temporalities, when they're going from this speculative space where we're sort of like brought into the consciousness of Bush, and then to this sort of like, I guess, to the hyper local, to what's your sort of like your everyday kind of occurrences that are sort of integrated in and emerging through the storytelling. So I love that kind of like those two loops, kind of how they're sort of like in conversation, and I could get little insight into how your sort of like narrative and is evolving, how they're sort of like
exactly. It has this kind of snowball effect, I guess, because what you learn from the first loop kind of carries into the second loop, and they kind of influence each other in a way. So that's how where the ontology starts to work in a unique way in the background.
Cybernetics of like communication, and how that communication would become in this kind of evolved knowledge production system, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess from my earlier works, even before this whole fragmented, this kind of short cycles in storytelling has been something I've been trying to explore. And so here I'm trying to really push it further, because this fragmentation is also, to me, a bit of the imaginary in the Middle East, because it's hard for us to really focus on anything that goes for a long stretch of time, because that's also maybe a reason we don't have much science fiction in the Middle East, because your imagination is constantly disrupted by immediate risks and dangers that risk your whole existence. So you cannot really afford to think that long term. So you're constantly trying to make, like, you have the shorter cycles of imagination. And I'm trying to make these shorter cycles a little bit more rich and thoughtful as much as I can, with the privilege I have living in the at least the safety that I have at the moment. But
sorry, go on, Ali.
No, that's what I wanted to say. That's this. on a personal level, that's also kind of like my way of dealing with narration and narrative. I cannot really deal with long term, long journeys in any kind of forms of storytelling, because my mind starts to wander, and maybe that's also something that is embedded in my imagination and many others. I believe so.
It's so fascinating. I think it's really interesting when you're connecting these ideas of fragmentary or incremental notions of engagement through sort of access to sort of short form storytelling and how that connects to safety. And I said, I don't know, you've got enough time to really talk about that now, but it's also something I've been thinking about in my own research as well. This idea of like, how do we create conditions that can emerge, and it is touching on these ideas of safety, and especially in a current time now, with everything that's happening in the world, this sort of like, how do we find the light, and how do we kind of like, in the darkness, and I think these kind of, when you're thinking about this Persian philosopher, and sort of this idea of looking at illuminism and how do we kind of generate light. I think it's such a it's kind of making me think of so many other references now, but perhaps we should move on a little bit because we don't have a huge amount of time.
True. Yeah.
So I'll let you wrap up, finish with the presentation, and then maybe we can have one question at the end.
Sure. Yeah. I'll be quick from now on. No worries. Thank you. So as you see, the simulation really influences the cinematic experience in the film, and vice versa. So there is this dynamic relationship in my work between simulation and cinema. And simulation influences the script, with the story that is told, and also the other way around is true, that the cinema and the story that is told also influences the features that exist in the simulation. There is this two-way relationship. They feed into each other. I go quickly into the immersive installation format, but because that's something I'm still developing. So this is where how I showed it in an exhibition in the film that you saw. I showed it as a video installation in an exhibition in a bunker in east of Netherlands called, the exhibition was called Emerging Exits. It was a group show in an old German Nazi bunker. It was a huge bunker. My attempt was to create a scenography, even though it was small, it was a prototype, with a sculptural element that is a physical object that is something physical that is sourced out of the world of Eshraq. But it has its own kind of like sculptural qualities. So I wouldn't call it a prop, because if it was a prop, it was a one-on-one recreation. But I kind of do something different with these physical objects, which I try to not translate them into the real world, but to transform them and see how the limits of the physical world can affect these objects.
It sounds like a sort of way to cast a hallucination. The song came to mind. It's like, how do you have the materiality of an hallucination?
Yeah, I know. Yes, I mean, for this, for example, in here, I made this light box sculpture, which was like 1 meter or 1.5, and then I made a 3D printed all the bird heads that they deliver the modules in the first the introduction of the film that you saw. So they're all kind of like
the work pre-Eshraq as well.
yeah, exactly. So it's kind of carries on. So this is idea I want to explore further when I expand the film into a feature length. Then what would be the bigger format with maybe multi-channel video projections and different objects, sculptural elements in between. So it becomes more of like, you know, a collective encounter with the work.
And how does the audience interact with the in the environment? Is there a sort of controller or?
Yeah. So far, I mean, my main goal is to create a video installation. So it won't be that much like interaction involved. Because the interactive element that I'm trying to work on is more of a prototype, an experimental thing that has to be done on parallel, but in a different kind of mindset. And then they can join, the interaction can join this format as well, which I can show here. This is a slide I wanted to explain that. Which is a prototype I'm trying to build hopefully this year and next year to build upon. This is the first iteration of it, just the concept. But I'm thinking of building a custom interactive interface for Ishraq, which the interface itself is part of the work, and how viewers touch, navigate, and interact with the simulation. It is all kind of also part of this philosophical implications. So the goal here is to really make the viewer present in the world of Ishraq in a very intuitive way. So that's why I chose this kind of like familiar format instead of using controllers or more like gaming interfaces. Because I want something for it to be that you don't have to see any manual in order to operate this. And it actually, the platform would detect the user's presence. So the work becomes alive when you stand here. And if you put your hands on the scooter wheels, then you can steer and surf to it and do have some agency. So you're basically overriding the system by being present on this platform, which is a kind of it's a different kind of interaction. It's not a very like tactile, that is like it responds exactly what you do, but you can override what the system does in the simulation. So yeah, it's a prototype, and I need to do a lot of research here. But yeah, hopefully I can build upon this later on. Towards the end, the last outcome of the work is documentation. So there's a devlog or a blog, shraq.io. You can visit if you're curious to know more in detail about the process. Here I share ongoing development, technical insights, philosophical reflections, visual documentation, design process, and contextual research, everything. So in the past 2 years, there's been almost 14 posts right now. For me, this becomes part of the work itself, the documenting the process, because the knowledge that you gain throughout these long stretches of time is important to be documented. Otherwise, outcomes itself are not necessarily what carries meanings, but the process of getting into those outcomes are as well important, equally important. And another aspect of the blog that really genuinely surprised me was, on a personal level, was how well it works as an onboarding tool. So whenever I bring new collaborators onto the project, I ask them to go read the blog from the bottom to top. Yeah, it gets them up to speed, and more importantly, it gives them a sense of process. So then their contribution feels more intentional when they join the journey. So feel free to explore their blog. So yeah, that's about it. If you want to, you can find me on these links if you're curious, and yeah, that's about it, I guess.
Thank you so much. That was such a brilliant sort of like journey through your thinking and your process, and also this amazing body of work that you're embarking on.
Thank you.
And I love the contradictions between I like short, but then I like long-term projects. But like I like short narratives that fit within long-term projects, and I think it's a really interesting is a really interesting way to kind of world build and think about these to also kind of look at like temporality within the digital practices, and also this idea of how these sort of intersections of storytelling and or speculative storytelling, and the sort of languages of video and the virtual worlds and are forming new narrative in a sense. I guess I said building on the tensions between cinema and video games, and how sort of mechanics of desire is so embedded in the language of cinema. You're thinking about, I guess, the sort of how does that sort of like intuitive versus the sort of like bodily like interface that you're developing through this sort of like interactive prototype, I guess the ones that you are developing at the moment. Is there any sort of like further ways that you're thinking about, or is there anything kind of specific that you can add to that exploration of interaction within the offline and online spaces? And how I guess also the sort of like idea of like loops, these sort of like different loop narratives that we're sort of tapping into as well. Kind of more reflection question.
No. I mean, for me, the question of format is just a constant exploration, and I think this kind of thing that you need to experiment with every kind of opportunity that comes up as an exhibition, and I tend to do this a lot, and I tend to think of exhibitions as forms of experimentation, and so I try one format here, like maybe like a multi-channel presentation of the videos, and then maybe I combine it with one interactive element and see how they work, and if there is any synergy, because there are two modes of presence. A real-time presence in a simulation is very different than viewing a narrative, immersive film. But maybe they work together. But for me, this question, and I would like to explore it based on the opportunities that come along. I don't have the luxury to choose what comes next, but if they come, I try to deal with the exhibition basically as a laboratory itself, as much as I can.
Yeah, and I guess really, I'd like to kind of just add that sort of like that digital art discourse and sort of institutional support for artists working in this space, which is still very sort of like, maybe misunderstood is a way to kind of to explain it, compared to more sort of contemporary or art or fine art perspective. I think this, I think what you're saying, this sort of like ability to be able to sort of shape shift in terms of and respond to the opportunities that that you have. You know, it does encourage like this kind of really experimental practice as well,
Yeah.
which I think is really sort of like evident in your work, Ali, and I think a lot of sort of like and it is very much informing like the way that you work. I just wondered if you had any sort of like thoughts on I guess.
Sure, yeah. No, I mean, that, as you said, this is a constant kind of juggle we have to do in a way that we have this kind of practice. And you, I'm sure, have it as a curator as well, because you have to kind of like... Because the thing is that the main issue here is with the way it's dealt with in the art world is that the discourse of the digital media or digitally generated art in general are always kind of like put in a box of digital and technology, and the discourse barely takes takes that box away, and so you barely see. You know, it's very hard to find a show where they show an artist, like group show, an artist has a practice like me or similar to me, next to an artist who does a very contemporary art, like fine art discourse. Because when you work, the sad thing is your medium defines your discourse, which it doesn't happen much in other mediums, in the established mediums in the contemporary art context. But in the digital art forms of art, it becomes even more narrow-minded in a way, that's as if whatever I say becomes about the technology. But actually, most of the time, I'm trying to say new things through technology. So the thing is that it's not focused on what you say as an artist, but it's how you say it. And
I think the real shift as well is like, you know, the research that goes around these your projects and your sort of like the way that you're sort of I think now positioning Eshraq especially, but I feel like that's a really key thing, because it's not just about computational arts, which, you know, I guess does come from sort of like cybernetics, but there's also this shifting sort of that the research which has is bound with so many other historical and sort of ontological approaches, philosophical approaches. So with that in mind, if there's one thing that you could do to like that you could restructure within an art institute, is there something, whether it's the funding model of the curatorial approaches or the public program, is there something you might think would better support these practices?
yeah, it's a hard question. I would say my main the main thing is just to look at the artists who do things with technology, just the way you look at the painter or an installation artist, or so not to fetishize, but also not to kind of limit the discourse that these kinds of artists can bring into the world, because it's between 2026 now and technology. We shouldn't talk about how we are basically formed by technology that you're making. So it's not a fetishized topic anymore. I mean, it's not 10 years ago, but the issues still linger in the institutions because they're so slow to respond and change. So that's maybe
we've both been working within these fields for a long time, and I mean, and I feel like things are maybe moving slowly, but things are hopefully changing, and I think that's a really good note to end on. So I want to say thank you so much, Ali. It's been really great, and thank you to Generation and Brother for having us. And please do stay tuned for the rest of the series, and we look forward to seeing you again. Thank you so much, Ali.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.